talk more about this information and the developing situation in Ukraine, retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmit. Good morning to you, as always. Thank you for joining us. I want to talk about Serbia real quick, because that was also part of the leaked information that Serbia has or has already supplied weapons to Kyiv. Why might that be significant?
Well, I think if they're supplying weapons to Kyiv, that's a good sign, because, as you know, Serbia has had a long relationship with Russia for years and years. They actually feel they're part of the Russian heritage. We are involved ourselves in the war inside of Kosovo and inside of Bosnia to try to separate the Russian-leaning Serbs and those in Bosnia from the Western world, very similar to what we're seeing in Ukraine. It looks like Serbia has chosen the right route, and that will also give them a better path to membership inside of NATO and the EU.
What do you make of the fact that Serbia is denying the documents are true?
Well, if I was Serbia and I was trying to give the impression that I'm straddling the East and the West, I would not want that information to be known, because when you start supplying weapons, it suggests that you're taking a side, and the other side, of course, is not going to be responsive to that. And candidly, there are a number of Serbians that still feel themselves Russian and not Serbian, and certainly not part of the West, and certainly not part of support for Ukraine.
One other finding I mentioned a moment ago, according to the leaked documents, Ukrainian agents have engaged in drone attacks in Belarus and also in Russia. These are targets outside of Ukraine's territory. If that's true, will it force the U.S. and others to reconsider or limit military assistance?
Well, not if it's limited to drones, but that has been a major concern of the United States, and candidly for Kiev to, on one hand, tell us, give us more, but not honor the restrictions that we put on those weapons that we give them, or on the rules of engagement. The net effect of this will be to make it much more difficult for the United States to provide weapons if they're being used outside of the restrictions that we impose.
Another piece of leaked information indicates the U.S. said it doubted Ukraine's counteroffensive would yield any big gains. How does that impact momentum and morale on the battlefield if that gets to the front lines?
Well, I think that's right. It will affect both. If they can't do a counteroffensive, then what you have is static warfare. And static warfare drains morale like no other kind of warfare there is. In a little bit of self-promotion, I wrote an article on this in the Wall Street Journal last July, fearing that we would find ourselves in this position, trench-like warfare, which we haven't seen since World War I.
A moment ago, I mentioned President Biden has spoken with the parents of Evan Gershkovich. He's the Wall Street Journal reporter who has been detained wrongfully, according to the U.S., in Russia. What are the options for the U.S. government right now?
Well, I think the main thing is that we've got to enter into negotiations if we're serious about getting Evan back, as well as getting Paul Whelan back, who has been ignored in the last two hostage negotiations, is what I would call this. So I think the United States has an office inside the State Department that talks about hostage situation and hostage release. They've been very successful up to this point around the world. But as they did with Brittany Griner, we need to get those other two Americans out as soon as possible.
Is it a fear that more Americans, including journalists, will be targeted given the rise in tensions between the two nations in this most recent detainment?
Oh, certainly. I think that's probably one of the easiest way for a country to explain, indicate displeasure with another country. Russia has been doing this for years. This was part of the day-to-day activity during the Cold War period. They understand that when you start talking about individuals being held in Russia, it in many ways makes the U.S. government seem weak if we're not able to get them out. And that's exactly what the Russians are trying to do with this.
Yeah, we'll continue to follow that case. You know, it's been more than a year since Russia invaded Ukraine, and being so far away, we're seeing fewer and fewer images of how bloody the battle has been. But a new report from the United Nations estimates that 8,500 civilian deaths have happened since the start of the war, 501 children. Those numbers, you and I know, are likely much higher than that. What, if anything, can be done to stop Russia from targeting civilians in the ongoing battle?
Well, that's very much like asking what it would stop the Nazis in World War II from the Battle of Britain, from trying to destroy all the cities inside of Britain and the civilians inside. I don't think there is an answer to that question. The most drastic option, which nobody will consider, is to actually do the same to Russian cities. But at the same time, I think that would cause this war to expand significantly into NATO. So I think what we've got to do is fight hard to end this war as quickly as possible. And that's the only solution that I see. War crimes tribunals don't seem to be a disincentive. Public condemnation doesn't seem to be an incentive. Sanctions don't seem to be an incentive. So the answer is fight this war, get it over with. That's the best chance for any of these attacks on Kiev infrastructure, but more importantly, Ukrainian citizens.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.